What's happening, everyone? Hey, we are having so much fun here with the Adventure Box podcast. Can't wait to tell you a little bit more of what we were talking about on Tuesday. That is Isaac and Ishmael. You're like, who the heck is Isaac and Ishmael? If you weren't listening to the last Tuesday, you gotta read that. You gotta listen to that one. That's going to fill in a lot of information. And again, we're getting a lot of this information from the Bible, the Quran, and Jewish tradition, because that's basically where the information comes from. And if we had more, we would grab more. And actually, there are some archaeological things. Those are in the curriculum. I don't have time to explain all of the things that show the evidence of these historical parts happening. Again, we're not talking about the religious part. We're talking about the historical part. But if you are Christian, you're going to want to hear this. If you're Muslim, you're going to want to hear this. If you're Jewish, you're going to want to hear this. And if you don't believe in any of it, you're going to want to hear this. So stay tuned. Here we go. Okay, so first we're going to be talking about the first son of Ishmael. First son of Abraham, who is Ishmael. Now, let me show you a picture. Now, if you're seeing this, you're going to see a picture of Abraham walking in front of his two sons. That image is completely false. Completely false. Remember, we talked about this last week. Ishmael was 25 years old when Isaac was 11 and going up for sacrifice. So this picture, that is not a 25-year-old. So it is wrong. A lot of the drawings that were a lot of the illustrations that were drawn were actually from the Renaissance. The Renaissance based a lot of things off of what the people in Italy, people in Rome, the people in those types actually believed others looked like. So it had a lot of influence. Those that are drawn by the Greeks has a lot of influence from Greek thought processes and culture. So this, wrong. Okay, so we're going to go through a little bit more of these two people, though, Isaac and Ishmael. Now, here's one other thing to know. I won't be showing any images of Ishmael because actually in Muslim tradition, Islamic tradition, they don't like pictures of people like prophets and such. So out of respect for everyone, I'm not going to show a picture of it, minus a child's image drawn in the Renaissance time period. Now, let's go into these two. So Ishmael was born first. He was born and he was the son of Hagar and Abraham. Hagar was the servant, the midwife, the maid, I don't know, for Sarah at the time. And so Ishmael was born, and then as he was growing up, his mom, Hagar, and Sarai at the time, did not actually get along very well. So she was sent away. Hagar, according to the Bible, basically became a little stuck up for the fact that she actually was able to give Abraham a son, and Sarai was not. And so she was sent away. Now, here's an interesting thing. So we talked about in the Bible and the Quran how they had a lot of the same stories. Now, in this, it actually talks about, well, we're not going to go through Isaac's. Actually, we're going to go through Ishmael's story first. So let's go through what happened to him and such. Okay, so again, according to the Quran, Ishmael was born by Abraham and Hagar. Now, they spent a few years together, and then they left. Now, here's the interesting thing, because that's according to the Bible. In the Quran, around that same time of 25 is when Ishmael left. So this is actually around the time when I'm trying to get this completely in my head because I have not actually studied the Quran and their history. But it's just very interesting how this all works out. Now, in his infancy, when Hagar was sent away, they are left by Abraham to a barren area, which is thought to be of Mecca. So during this time, Abraham prays over this area and to be blessed for Ishmael and Hagar. Now, Hagar searches for water and miraculously finds it. A spring appears. This is all around the area of Mecca. Now, in Ishmael's early life, he grows up in Mecca, learning the Arabic language and becoming a respected member of the community. Now, again, this is Ishmael, the first son of Abraham. And he is credited with the integration into a tribe. Now, the tribe is actually called the Jurhum tribe that settles Mecca. And he has all these different things that happen to him. Again, we're not going to go through completely because we're not talking about the Arab nation. We will be talking about them later on. But as of right now, we're doing ancient Israel. But just to know that Ishmael basically, according to the Quran, settles up this area. And we're going to go over where a lot of this information comes, but later on. Now, again, that's Ishmael. Let's go back to Isaac. Okay, so Isaac is born around 2066 BC. Now, Isaac is born to Abraham and Sarah. Sarah was called Sarai. And during the last covenant by God, she was given a new name. He was too, because he was Abram before he became Abraham, which means father of multitudes. Now, as we've talked about last week, on Tuesday, multitudes, because he now has Isaac and he has Ishmael, and both will be ending up getting huge amounts of people, and we're going to get over that in just a little bit. So now Isaac is named and circumcised, about 8 days old, and then but at 3 years old he has the conflict with Ishmael. Now again, it says that in the Quran, it was during his infancy that Ishmael was booted. But actually, this would have been when he's about 17 years old. So according to the Bible, 17 years old is when Ishmael and his mom had to leave. And so they separated the two. So mom, older woman, Ishmael, 17 years old. That is the age that you would usually take care of someone. Okay, so now Isaac is starting to be a young man, starting to grow older. Young man in this time is about the time he's become a teenager. And this is when God tells Abraham to sacrifice Isaac and sacrifice him on an altar. Now, I told you on Tuesday that we were going to talk about why this is significant. Okay, remember, Abraham was from an idolatrous nation, from Babylon. He was part of like a sacrifice by fire, remember? And now God is asking him to sacrifice his son by fire. Wait a second. That was a little bit of a PTSD moment there. Okay. So again, this is the Quran Quran and Jewish tradition are what tells us about the younger days of Abraham and the trial by fire. Now, it's the Bible and the Quran and Jewish tradition that all talk about this offering of Isaac by fire. So now you can see why it would be very interesting for someone to actually say, I have to sacrifice my son by the same way that they would have sacrificed me. I don't know if I could do this. Plus, it's my son. It's my only son from my beloved wife. But God says, do it. So he brings him up to the hill, and then God says, stop! You've proven yourself. Here's a ram. Sacrifice the ram. Sacrifice the ram to me. That's it. So at that point, let's see, Isaac's about 37 years old later on. Oh, sorry, next point. Isaac's about 37 years old and his mom dies. So Sarah dies and is buried. Now, at 40 years old, or a year, maybe two later, he's actually supposed to marry somebody. They don't know who. So a servant is sent out to go back to his homeland and through a test, bring back somebody. to marry him. He doesn't know who it is. It's an arranged marriage that's not even arranged by them, between like fathers and households, which is the tradition. No, this is the servant went out and needed to water his camels. Rebecca came out, watered his camels, and she was accepted back. Now, he didn't take her. He talked to the family. The family knew who Abraham was and allowed the servant to take Rebecca back to get married to Isaac. Okay, so now jump forward. Again, this is when he's 40 years old. By the time he's 60 years old, he's 20 years later, married to Rebecca. He now has two sons. He has Jacob and he has Esau. Now, Esau is the firstborn. He's the one that's supposed to have the birthright. Esau is also very hairy on his arms. So Jacob and his mother, Rebecca, who Rebecca favored his Jacob, has this idea. We should put skins, hides, on, or hairs from fur on your arms. So when your father feels them, he'll think that they are your hair. And then he will give you the birthright. Well, so Isaac, not knowing what's going on, because he's blind, gives the birthright to Jacob instead of to Esau. Now this causes a great stir between the two. And Esau, a great hunter, is furious with his brother. And so Jacob has to leave. He's told by his mom, leave. And then come back later, like years later. So he moves. He leaves far away. And then he's actually told to come back. And so he has to come back. And there's a famine in the land, which moves Isaac and his family. Now, there's a lot more to the story. I'm not going to go through all of it. He marries Rachel after his father-in-law tricks him into marrying her older sister, Leah. And then Rachel and Leah both go back with him. And there's a lot more to the story. But again, we're not going over the religious part. We're just going to the historical part. They come back to Canaan. And Jacob is scared out of his mind that Esau is going to kill him. And Esau meets him on the road with a lot of people with him. And so Esau, long story short, Jacob comes to Esau. They make up, actually, and they are welcomed into the area. Now, Isaac, now, yeah. So during this time, I think I went a little bit ahead in the history, so maybe it's just a tiny bit off. But so he's reunited with his brother about 20 years after being separated. And Jacob actually returned from 20 years in Haran. So that's what it was. Jacob actually had gone to Haran when he and his brother had that instance, that issue that came up. Now, there was also other things, such as conflict with those that lived in Canaan. Now, some say the Bible actually says Philistines. Now, the Philistines weren't exactly there at the same time. It was most likely another tribe that were basically given the same characteristics as the Philistines. Don't know. But at this point, there's a lot of different conflicts that are happening, a lot of different famines. And the family actually comes back together. So they are reunited, and about 1886, at about 180 years old, Isaac passes away. This is after the reunion, so he's able to see his sons come back together, and Isaac dies. Now, we're not going into Jacob yet. Now, Esau basically goes to the wayside. We don't really talk much about him. He's a great nation, but we don't talk about him much after this. But Jacob, he does something very significant, which includes the 12 sons, which would then become 12 tribes of Israel. So that's something that's very important to understand and to know. But we're not going to go to that yet. So now you can see why it's so important that when you have religious documents that are ancient, that you can still use them as ancient documents. So you want to be able to use them together to get pieces of information that you might not have been able to get for history's sake. We're not talking about for religious sake. Religious sake, you stick with the one that you know to be true. But when it comes to historical, you have to be able to pick in pieces from all different places. If you find something buried into the ground, you're going to have to take that with some, again, grain of salt, but the possibility that might be true. If you find something else, you take it with a grain of salt until you're able to mold it, to test it, and to see if you actually believe that it is true. So this is some of the great things that happen between Abraham, who passes away after having Abraham and Ishmael. Abraham having Ishmael and Isaac. And then what happened with Ishmael being in Mecca, or at least that's the idea of what happened to him. And you have Isaac, who then goes to stays in Canaan and becomes a great nation there. Now, there's so much more to the story. And again, we're not going to the religious part. There's so much to the story after this part. But this is going to have to wait till next week. Because next week we're actually going to, Jacob and Joseph. Joseph then going into Egypt and how that fits in. We talked about it a little bit last month when we talked about Egyptian history. But now we're going to be talking about a lot more when it comes to that. So stay tuned. I can't wait to tell you more. This one's a short one, but it's because we don't really have that much information about Jacob that's historical. Isaac, but with historical. And when it comes to Ishmael, even though we were talking about it last time, we don't want to go much into Ishmael's story because that goes into when we teach the Arab Peninsula and all the people that are in the Arab nations down there and what happens to them in the ancient times. This brings it up to about the time of Muhammad. It will go up to about the time of Muhammad, but then it will stop because that would be more of the medieval times, because 800 on is about the times of the medieval times. And this has to do with all the caliphates and everything like that. And that's also really fascinating. But that being said, thanks for joining me on this great adventure, which is the Adventure Box podcast. Thanks to Historical Conquest for bringing us this. Thank you for all of you for listening to this. Can't wait to see you next time. Have a great day. Take care. Bye-bye. If you have any comments or questions, add them to the comments below. Otherwise, we'll see you tomorrow, actually. Take care. Bye.